everyone? That's loud. Better? Second, yeah. Yeah. Hi everyone, thank you for coming to listen to me. I think this one, just to let you know, might be a little bit different. It's going to be a little bit provocative, possibly quite controversial. There is even a chance that some vegans here might change how they describe themselves when we're done. Just a small chance. My name's Mark Ross. About 7 years ago, I made 2 conscious decisions. The first was to start being kinder to animals by no longer paying into industries that exploit them. And the second was to do whatever I could do to help them. Like many others, I spent my first few weeks telling everybody that I could do about what truly happened to animals, about what I'd learned. I was convinced that every single person I spoke to would immediately change like I did. Well, we all know how that went. I've always had a fascination with psychology, and since questioning this so-called norm, I've been looking into the real reasons why people aren't making this change. Not what they tell us, but the actual psychological reasons. Some of you might see me here last year. I'm going to talk on how important activism is and how everyone has a role to play. This year I wanted to do something a little bit different. Not just question non-vegans, but also question some of our own existing strategies. Now, you might not agree with everything I'm going to tell you today. In fact, if you do agree, I'm not pushing you hard enough. The purpose of this is to get you to question, to offer you some new perspectives, and at the very least, leave you with something that lingers in your mind long after you've gone home. I will be asking a few questions as we go through. Please feel free to just jump in. There are no wrong answers. So, right now, there are over 150 million vegans in the world. And yet, after more than 80 years of modern activism, progress is far slower than logic alone predicts. Maybe we need to rethink our tactics, and we need to look at the reasons why what we're doing is not proving to be as effective as we think. I want you to consider something. Imagine if there are only 10 passionate vegans in the entire world. Listen to the numbers you hear. If each of these 10 went out tomorrow and spoke to 2 people and convinced those 2 people that they should also become passionate vegans. We then have 20 more new passionate vegans. Those 20 go out the following day and they each speak to 2 people. It would take less than 1 month for the entire world to become vegan. That's just to show you the power of exponential growth. So why is it happening so slowly? What are the true barriers? So to start that, I want to give you a sense of our place in a much larger timeline. This is an idea inspired by a film I saw recently. It's called The Cosmic Calendar. You might have heard of a guy called Carl Sagan. The Cosmic Calendar, it compresses the entire history of the universe into a single year. So the Big Bang, it happens on the first second of January the 1st, and right now is the last second of December the 31st. Galaxies started forming late spring. Our Milky Way and solar system is formed around about September time. Plants and animals don't show up until about a week before Christmas. The dinosaurs came on the 24th of December. They were gone by the 29th. Our earliest human ancestors don't show up until roughly 10:30 PM on December the 31st. That's about 300,000 years ago. All of recorded human history, every person you've ever heard of, all the kings, the battles, inventions, everything, our entire civilization, it's all happened within the last 10 seconds. So what we're going to do, we're going to focus on that very last second, which is basically the modern era of humanity, and we're going to build a new calendar focused on rights. So, 1525, January, this is European Renaissance. America's Declaration of Independence. We finally abolished slavery in August. Women win the right to vote. Justice movements like Black Lives Matter, all of these sorts of big movements, they start to go global on December the 28th. Now, what we're going to do is obviously The point that is to show you this is that it's incredibly recent in our evolution. You consider this is after the first 295,000 years that we've been around. It's incredibly recent that we started recognising inequalities and injustice. In other words, decency and compassion are pretty much brand new concepts. Let's show Andrew White at the same time. It took until September the very first Society for Protection of Cruelty to Animals. In October, Peter Singer published Animal Liberation as part of the new modern rights movement. EU, December the 16th, finally bans cosmetic testing on animals. And just a couple of days ago on this calendar, November 27th, animal sentience is starting to get recognised in law. So here we are, right now, in the last second, of the last minute, of the last day, we're standing on the edge of inevitability. Change is coming. A kind of offer all beings isn't just possible, it's imminent. Let's just get a quick show of hands actually, just get an idea of who's in the room. Please put your hands up if you identify as either plant-based or vegan. That's a lot of you. Please keep your hands up, by the way, if you also consider yourself an activist. That's a good number. And for anybody who hasn't put their hands up yet, keep your hands up now if you're maybe just curious, you haven't made that change yet, you're just exploring. Perfect, thank you. Okay, good mix. So, you probably, that was that bit. So you probably noticed something. Change doesn't happen easily, not for individuals, and certainly not for societies. So I want to unpack why, and I want to talk about resistance. Now, people don't change because they're heartless. They resist because they're human. There are four main internal factors that influence this. The first one, many of us have heard of this term, cognitive dissonance. I love animals, I eat animals, and this conflict inside us hurts. And this is where we come up with these crazy excuses, things like, oh, plants feel pain, or if we didn't eat animals, they don't run the planet. The second type, it's called identity threat. If I change, am I going to become that person? When I visit my friends, my family, am I the difficult one, the awkward one? The third type, I'm not going to eat too much detail, I've got time. Okay, third one, justification systems. These are the ingrained reasons that we use to uphold the status quo. Think about culture, tradition, convenience, taste. And these are all powerful forces that tell us this is just how things are. The final one, habit and social conditioning. We are creatures of habit. We instinctively copy the crowd. From childhood, we are conditioned to eat certain foods and view animals in certain ways. And breaking these deep-seated patterns is incredibly difficult. Information alone is rarely enough for people to change. People will change slowly, socially, but also with support. There is also another wall, and it's external. It's not just our own internal psychology, there's also how things are perceived by others. We're seen as extreme, we're seen as militant, preachy, judgmental, we're called cult-like. Some people even call us hypocrites. These opinions, they create another type of wall. A wall of social resistance. This is often harder to break down than any logical argument. Before we've even opened our mouths, the defence walls are up. Now, the real reason why people don't make this change, it isn't about a lack of intelligence or compassion. They are deeply rooted in human psychology. The fear of becoming that person is a very real social pressure, and for some, the word itself is acquired baggage, with stereotypes of being too extreme or an all-or-nothing approach that can feel overwhelming. Now, just a quick question for those who did have their hand up originally, people that are already living this way. What were the reasons why you decided to make that change? Why are you plant-based or vegan? Please shout it out.
Ethics. Animals.
Animals, yeah. Ethics.
Environment.
Environment.
Rights. Rights.
Rights. Rights, perfect. Health. Yep, health, environment, and ethics are the three most common ones that we have. Now, these are all justifiable reasons that we give, so we have to justify it sometimes. For me, it comes down to something far simpler. It's simply the right thing to do. That's all it is, it's the right thing to do. Now, while an individual's path to veganism, sorry, I have to remember to do that bit. While an individual's path to veganism is generally quite straightforward, they hear the truth, they get support where they need it, and then they align their actions and their morals, changing society is much more complicated and needs a different approach. Just for example, laws and public policy would need to change, food and agricultural system would need to be reformed, cultural and societal norms would need to be shifted. And these highlight a huge problem. Society itself will not shift until enough individuals demand it. But significant numbers of individuals will not shift until society makes it easy. I want to quickly just talk about factory farms just for a second. Hands up if you would happily join a protest to get them all shut down. Yeah, quite a lot of you. Most people, regardless of their lifestyle, most people agree that they're unethical. So let's just imagine this. Imagine next week, somehow, we spoke to the entire world, convinced all of them that factory farms were completely unethical, we convinced all of them never to buy them ever again, and all the factory farms got shut down. How amazing would that be? But here's the twist. Those people that did that likely didn't stop exploiting animals. They probably shift their money to cage 3 or free range. And at first this still does sound great. There's going to be obviously a lot less animals being harmed. But a week later we go back to these people and we say, thanks very much for doing the right thing last time and doing the ethical thing and no longer buying from factory farms. But what we asked them to do last time is not enough. It's also what they're doing now is also not ethical. Most people would feel incredibly frustrated if we did that. Because, hold on, you told us that it's unethical to do this, now you're telling me what I'm doing is still unethical, you want me to change it again? Go away. You've got to like. This is the problem, when the goalposts move, the next path becomes far harder. And this is the danger of focusing solely on incremental reforms that still keep animals in the picture. Yes, it can reduce suffering in the short term, and that matters. But they can't be mistaken for the end goal. If we confuse waypoint with the destination, we risk protecting the very system that we set out to dismantle. Now, don't get me wrong, if all factory farms were shut down, obviously the number of animals suffering would drop drastically. What we don't do, we don't often consider the unintended side effects. So, as we mentioned protests a second ago, this is obviously a really popular way of approaching change. Generally speaking, answer this one, where do most of the big protests take place? Particularly in the UK?
London.
London, yes. Why? Because of how many people are there. But how many other causes are there? How many other groups are there holding protests also in London? Somebody said literally a week ago today, they told me there's probably a protest happening in London every day of every single week. And the catch being is that yes, there's going to be a lot of people there, and yes, there's going to be some people paying attention, but when you see the same thing again and again and again, it starts to become background noise. Let's flip this around. Let's ask, how many protests do you think you see in small towns and villages? Let's like around the corner from here, you've got Emsworth or Wickham. How many protests happen there? Probably none at all. Do you think if you did hold a protest there, people would pay attention and be like, hold on, what's going on in my village? What's all that about? The impact per person could be far greater. That's how it is. This highlights something fundamental about human behaviour. People follow the crowd. We have a pack mentality. We know, however, Now, with every rights issue that's ever been addressed in history, civil rights, etc., the crowd has always been right. It's always been the minority that has had to push for change. But the question isn't how do we get it's not only how do we get the crowd to shift, but it's also, are we ourselves guilty of also following the crowd, even in activism? Because if we are just simply copying what everyone else does, not ask whether it's truly effective, we're not leading change, we're just another pack swept along by momentum. Some of you will have heard of the echo chamber before, I'm sure, but let me highlight it. If I come to you with a brilliant, well thought out idea, it could be a new outreach technique, it might be a new product, new business idea, an idea for the speech. Chances are you want to be supportive, whether or not it's going to be truly effective or not. This shows another one of our paradoxes, especially with activism. If you pitch an idea to fellow vegans, chances are they'll love it, whether or not it's truly effective in the real world. We can easily end up cheering on strategies that only work inside of our own bubble. And the only people really who can validate our ideas are the people least inclined to talk to us. Let me show you something else. Let's say, as an example, I have just done some outreach and I have my best ever outreach I've ever done. I speak to 100 people, and out of those 100 people, 20 of them fully commit to going vegan. Not only will they become vegan, they're even going to become activists. How amazing, not 2, but 20% conversion. Wow, that would be incredible. The question becomes, what did these other 80 think? Did they leave or walk away from feeling inspired? Well, I would have thought they'd become vegan if they were inspired. Were they indifferent? What, my talk with them had no impact whatsoever? Well, did they walk away irritated? Unfortunately, but we don't want to admit it, that's probably the most likely. This applies to all types of activism, protest, outreach. While we want to convince as many people as we can, we rarely consider the potential barriers that we create with everyone else. And the uncomfortable truth is that in some cases the harm to the movement, the negative impressions, might end up outweighing the benefit of a handful of conversations. We need to think less in terms of width per conversation and more in terms of the overall balance sheet of public perception. Are we leaving society with more openness to change or less? Now, am I saying we shouldn't do any activism at all? Not at all. Without it, a huge amount of the progress that we've already made wouldn't have happened. But what I am saying is that we need to be a bit more strategic about our activism and ensure we are building bridges rather than building walls. So, if we can imagine what kind of world we would truly like to see in the future, I'm going to guess most of you would envision a world where animals are no longer exploited, where our food systems are sustainable, where kindness is a norm. Now, in that world, would we still be saying things like, oh, would you like some vegan ice cream, would you like some vegan cheese? Of course not. If everyone is vegan, then the word vegan becomes obsolete. It's just food, it's just life. And this is a central paradox. More people than ever care about animals, the environment, and health, yet the label itself is facing resistance and ridicule. Maybe the real change isn't to ask people to go vegan, maybe it's just to ask them to stop supporting cruelty. But imagine what would happen if we did have that vegan world, and we did have this idyllic place to live. In that situation, and somebody comes along and say, oh, guess what, I've made this new dessert. What is it? Cow ice cream. Cow ice cream? What do you mean? What, you got a cow, you forced her to become pregnant, stole her baby, stole her milk, and you made a dessert out of it? How could you do something so horrible? Because what would happen at that point is that the burden of justification comes on the person who's committing cruelty. But in our current world, the burden of truth is on the person who chooses not to participate. This shows you the power of cultural norms. Now, we shouldn't ignore the fact that enormous change has already happened. Plant-based milks outsell dairy in many places. Fast food chains are all adding plant-based options on their menus. The momentum is real, but it's not moving fast enough, and it won't do unless we change the narrative. So, if direct confrontation and incremental demands can backfire, if the vegan word itself faces ridicule and there's also a huge barrier, well, what does come next? Well, the answer is simple, albeit controversial. Now, I want to be clear, of course, if I could click my fingers and make the entire world compassionate overnight, of course I would do. But this is about how to bring about change as quickly as possible. The simple solution is this. Let's stop using the word vegan. It shouldn't even be a word. The sooner we are able to remove it from our language, the better. Now, not the practice, of course, not the ethics, not the food, just the label. Because labels build tribes. Tribes create defences. We should be the normal. And it's everyone else who should have a label, and then they have to justify it. Now, I know that sounds a little bit radical, but history shows us that it's not only possible, it's inevitable. The question isn't if, but when. The real strategy, however, is how soon to lean into this shift, but without losing the people that are just beginning to question their habits. Think about this. We don't label people who don't kick dogs or do other horrible things. We label the harm. We don't label the kindness. I mean, how many times have you got, I'm sure many of you have heard this, how many times do you hear vegans arguing about themselves about what it means to be vegan, what is a vegan? Well, you see that on the label. It's like, it's not a vegan food, it's plant-based food. I know many of us are proud vegans, I have been a proud vegan, but we need to overcome our hubris and we need to start letting that word go. Instead, I would like to introduce you to 3 very accurate terms that I'm going to be proposing, and this describes people that still support animal harm. But importantly, they describe actions rather than just being a generic label. So the first up, we have an umbrella term. It's called a centaur. A centaur, this is for every single person that is not 100% plant-based. They consume sentient beings. Within a centaur, there are 2 subsections of centaur. The first type of centaur, you might well have heard of this before, it is called the necrovore, death eater, eater of the dead. Now, this isn't to be confused with carnivore. A carnivore hunts their prey and eats what they have just killed. We don't do that. The second type of centaur, this is for people that don't consume flesh of animals, is an exploitivore, to eat the products of exploitation. This includes eggs, milk, honey, cheese, etc. Now, I don't want to get too technical. If we're talking about anything that isn't related to food, we change the word for to the word fructor. So a fructor is somebody who profits from or enjoys a benefit from. So a nectar fructor might have a leather jacket or have a leather handbag. An exploited fructor might not have anything to do with animals at home, but they can go to visit a zoo. Now, I know these words sound provocative, but cruelty should sound provocative. Can you imagine on a dating site, oh, I'm a nectar, by the way. Can be wanted. Of course, they'll take a little bit of get used to at first, but they're new words. But it's always us having to defend our kindness. Isn't it time that cruelty has to justify itself? And this is the heart of what I mean about normalising kindness, to shift the societal narrative. Now, these words, they are a tool for a specific purpose. To shift that narrative, make cruelty visible. Just like the word vegan, these words will also become more and more unnecessary over time. In case you are curious about us, by the way, we are insectivores, non-violent eaters, or more technically, phytovores, plant eaters. They are describing actions, they're not just a label. We should stop saying, just as a summary, that's all of them. Just as a summary, we should stop saying I am a vegan, because this just reinforces that label. Instead, we prescribe our actions. We need to flip the script to where it should be. The future world will not happen overnight, but people will follow what is easy and what is normal. We need to switch the current defaults. Let's have menus, having all those delicious plant-based menus at the top, and you've got a rubbish one, the bolt-on animal one at the bottom. Let's flip it around. Cafes, plant milks being the default, the dairy option being the bolt-on. Some places are now starting to do this. From a societal shifting perspective, this cannot be about purity. Not at where we are right now. It's about creating norms. If we make the kind choice the easy choice, then that then becomes the norm. And this is how we get society to change. The shift, not just a hopeful vision, is an inevitable destination. The word vegan, it will, one day, become obsolete. Just like abolitionist. We don't have a word for people that don't own slaves, or a word for that believe women should vote. Why? Well, it became a moral stance, which then became an unquestioned norm. Now, as a movement, it might be slightly too soon to drop the word vegan altogether, of course. Right now, it does still remain a vital source of identity, connection, and discovery. It helps curious people find community. It helps restaurants signal options, and of course, it helps activists organise. For someone new, being vegan, being deeply isolated, knowing that there are others out there that share your values can be a lifeline to remind you you're not alone. If we did try to erase it overnight, we would risk losing visibility, clarity, and momentum at the very moment the world needs most to find us. But what we can do now, start immediately, is significantly start to reduce its use and reframe the conversation. We can start today by simply asking people not to support animal abuse without demanding that they adopt a label. We can begin to normalise the idea that compassion is the default, the norm, and that these choices that cause harm are the ones that need to be explained. Let's put the spotlight on those whose habits are out of step with what's natural, sustainable, and ethical. We can start using words to make that reality clearer. Begin to reframe non-vegans with the more accurate terms: centivore, exploitative, herbivore. This is a powerful way to start that process, flipping the script and putting the burden of justification on those who choose to consume suffering. Now, even if the world isn't ready to abandon the vegan word today, we can start nudging the cultural conversation in that direction, step by step, until the label itself quietly withers away because it's no longer needed. And by doing this, we achieve two things. The first, we normalise living without exploitation, and we make those who still cling to labels, outdated habits, seem like the peculiar minority, which is obviously what they are. As a bonus, when people no longer have a label to put on us, it makes it incredibly stupid to hear them do those stupid phrases that they come out with, and they're pointing, look at those stupid vegans, well, they can't say that anymore. Look at those stupid kind people. Doesn't make sense. It sounds ridiculous even wrong. Think about all the groups that exist, the anti-vegan tribes. Those groups wouldn't mean anything anymore. We need to focus on the core principle, simply not supporting animal abuse, because this is a universal value, and almost everyone, plant-based or not, almost everyone agrees that animal abuse is wrong. Now let me reiterate, this shift will happen. It is inevitable. One day we won't need the word vegan at all, it will simply be the norm, just as we no longer label someone that's a non-slave owner. There will come a time where choosing compassion, health and sustainability is so obvious it doesn't require any special label. That day will come, but for now we walk in two worlds. One where the label does have practical utility. We've also got this other world where its eventual obsolescence is already on the horizon. And our job is to push those two worlds wisely. Societal shifts happen not through individual conversations, but when the default options shift. When plant-based foods are simply food, widely available, affordable, and delicious without needing a special label. But to get there, we must understand the fears and address the roadblocks with empathy, not judgment. When kindness towards all animals becomes the unquestioned norm, we don't need to push for veganism. We won't need to push for veganism. We'll simply be living in a compassionate world. I want to emphasise that empathy as a tongue-twister. We need to realise that everyone that exists is behind one of those resistance walls. Most of us were not brought up vegan. We didn't question it until we did. But we need to realise that for everyone else, even if they're farmers, work in a slaughterhouse, if they're hunters, everyone's been raised differently and they all have different amounts of resistance behind those walls. I promise you, as much as we might want to think it, no one wakes up going, oh, I'm an evil person, let me go and hurt an animal today. They have just been raised differently and they're stuck behind the same rules as everyone else. We need to meet everyone where they are and bring them to us. So let's come back to right now for some final thoughts and take a moment to consider the power of our focus. Much of our activism is about fighting against what we don't want. We don't want animal cruelty, we don't want factory farming, we don't want exploitation. And while this is understandable, it obviously comes from a place of deep passion, psychology suggests that by focusing intently on what we don't want, can inadvertently reinforce it. We see this in the public sphere all the time. Debates about diet, for example, often polarise into an us versus them camp. The carnivore diet, in many ways, has been built on the philosophical and dietary opposition to veganism. Instead, let's redirect that immense energy. What if we shift our primary focus to the world we do want to live in? What does that world look like for animals? How does it feel like for us? By constantly visualising and working towards a positive future, a world where compassion by default, is a default, and where food doesn't come from suffering, where justice includes all beings, we harness a different kind of power. It's about pulling towards a desired reality rather than pushing against an undesirable one. It's about building bridges to the future we envision, step by compassionate step. In short, we have spent so much time fighting against what we don't want, maybe it's time to start working towards what we do. So, for those here that are not yet phytovores, you've got to start using the words. Perhaps you might have even recognised which resistant wall you're stuck behind. Don't worry, we're not going to ask you to adopt a label. I'm not going to. You can simply start practicing kindness. If you want support on how to do that, there's a brilliant free resource, Challenge 22. You will get a free dietitian, you'll get meal ideas, you'll get a mentor. You can ask as many questions you want to. You're doing a group of other people who are already doing that same thing. You'll get a lot of inspiration and a whole lot more. For the ahimsavores amongst you, I thought it sounded like a low yoga pose. A little bit. Let's see if we can start getting some defaults changed. Let's start creating some new norms. The vegan paradox is real. Our passion is immense and our arguments are sound, yet the world isn't changing fast enough. But by understanding the psychology of resistance, by critically examining our tactics, and by shifting our focus from demanding a label to just normalising kindness and simply not supporting animal abuse, we can unlock a more powerful, widespread and compassionate societal shift. It's about making the compassionate choice the easy choice, the default choice, the normal choice. So, if you remember just one thing, let it be this. Don't cling to the label, transcend it. Push the norm instead. We don't pay for animal abuse, that's not an identity. It's simply the baseline of kindness that we all own. The question, the world we dream of, is never in question. It's only a question of when. So let's make that future happen sooner. Thank you. I do have some handouts if you want them. There's a QR code as well. This basically gives a brief summary of everything I've just said. But if anybody's got any questions, feel free. We've got a few minutes, I think. Well, that went quicker than I thought.